interviews tonight, this Monday, looking for a way to keep the country out of recession. Should the government borrow money and spend more? Are there more taxes to be cut? The government sponsors a report on the sexual exploitation of children. Is it really as bad as the report says? We'll take a closer look. What do Ted Turner, Scottie Pippen, and David Rockefeller have in common? Yes, they're all rich. So why are they being subsidized? And whether it is unconventional beauty or imperfection in the modeling business, it sells.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin tonight with the red-hot battle about keeping the country out of recession. The country has not yet had 2 quarters with negative growth, which defines a recession, that shrinking economy, but the anxiety is national, and the debate about how to stay out of recession is now #1 on the political agenda. Today's a good example. President Bush went off to Florida trying to keep the focus on his signature issue, education. But the economy followed him everywhere. ABC's John Cochran has been with him all day.
Peter, as you say, the president wanted to talk about education, one of his favorite issues. But it is the economy that has fixated many Americans, Republicans included. After dodging questions in Washington about the need for more tax cuts to boost the economy, the president was asked again in Florida, where he told school kids to wave at the reporter.
Everybody say, "Hello, John."
Meeting with educators, Mr. Bush talked about the education bill he wants.
And it's now time for people to act in the nation's capital and get the bill to my desk so that people at the local level can start to plan.
Mr. Bush stayed on message, but it was his message, not the one many in his party are most concerned with. It's not just consumer confidence in the economy that has taken a hit. Bad news on top of bad news has shaken Republican confidence in winning next year's elections. Last week at this private Washington club, prominent Republicans told Mr. Bush's political advisor, Karl Rove, that the president needs to show more leadership on the economy. Party leaders were disappointed that when he did speak about higher unemployment figures, he did little more than express concern. Democrats, meanwhile, continue today to keep up the drumbeat.
It is the president. He got us into this mess. He needs to give us a blueprint for trying to get out of this mess.
Mr. Bush's fellow Republicans hope he will soon agree to back more tax cuts, a cut in the capital gains tax on investments, and in the payroll tax all workers pay. But Peter, Bush aides say the president worries that more tax cuts will eat up the Social Security surplus he has promised to protect. One Bush advisor said, look, the president is going to keep an open mind, but if the next round of economic figures are bad, the president will probably have to go with deeper tax cuts.
Thank you, John. John Cochran, who went with the president today. Engineering an economic revival, we probably need not tell you, is very much an art. So what are the options for President Bush and, for that matter, the Congress? Our business editor, Betsy Stark, is with us. Options on the table.
Peter, the options available to the President and Congress can be boiled down to 2 words, taxes and spending. And virtually all the tax and spending proposals under discussion are both politically and economically controversial. Politicians may be worried that the surplus is evaporating, but some economists say this is no time to worry about the government going into debt.
It's well established among economists that when the economy is growing slowly, as it is today, or when you're in a recession, deficit spending is exactly the medicine needed in order to give the economy the boost it needs.
Supporters of deficit spending by the government, whether it's on schools or highways or new telecom networks, say it creates good jobs at good wages and enables consumers to keep spending. Others say it's the private sector that has to grow for the economy to revive, and the best way to get it going is to cut the capital gains tax, the tax businesses and individuals pay on investment profits.
The capital gains tax, if it's reduced, that will encourage individuals to put more money into business, especially into the high-tech businesses that have borne the brunt of this economic slowdown.
Republicans favor a cut in the capital gains tax.
It will clearly cause a growth in the economy. It always does.
They're also discussing a cut in the payroll tax that companies and workers pay to fund Social Security. But even supporters of this idea say it's political hemlock.
If you reduce the Social Security payroll tax, you have less money flowing into the Social Security system, and we all know that politicians have made the Social Security Trust Fund sort of a nirvana, that we can't touch that trust fund.
Aside from the contentiousness of these ideas, another problem is timing. The economy needs help now, and the political process is often too slow to deliver relief in a timely way. Some say the only real game in town is the Federal Reserve, which has the option to keep lowering interest rates and is expected to do that next month.
One more time. Many thanks, Betsy Stark. And a word from the public on the subject. An ABC News Washington Post poll finds that most Americans favor reducing the size of President Bush's tax cut as a way to deal with the shrinking federal surplus. 57% of Americans favor cutting the tax cut, and 52% of Americans hold Mr. Bush more responsible than Democrats in the Congress for the smaller surplus. In the national briefing tonight, first, a related item. The Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, has declared war on bureaucracy. That's been done before, of course. Mr. Rumsfeld wants to do something about the billions of dollars he says are wasted on everything from keeping unneeded military bases open to tasks such as garbage collection in the military, which he believed could be sent to private contractors. In Sacramento today, the city's second major manhunt in 3 weeks has ended. A young man killed himself after being cornered by police. He was wanted in connection with 5 murders, and he had videotaped himself ranting at the world, which was a clue. And the Census Bureau says men are finally closing the population gap with women, if only slightly. There were 96 men for every 100 women last year. 20 years ago, there were 94.5 men for every 100 women. More men are actually immigrating to the United States, and fewer men are dying early. The overseas briefing tonight begins with word of a possible assassination in Afghanistan. General Ahmed Masud commanded the last real military opposition to the Taliban regime. U.S. officials say Masud has been killed by a suicide bomber disguised as a television cameraman. ABC's John McWethy reports from the Pentagon. This is a loss for the U.S. General Masud helped the U.S. gather intelligence on the Taliban and also on the accused terrorist Osama bin Laden, who they believe to be in Afghanistan. The organization Save the Children reports newborn deaths have fallen 14% in the past decade, thanks in part to improved vaccination programs. 4 million babies still die every year, mainly in the poorer countries before they're a month old. Japan got hit by Typhoon Danos today. A foot of rain fell in some parts of the country, triggering mudslides that buried homes and highways, and 2 people died. And in London, a word from the Queen Mother. She says that reports of her demise are premature and amusing. The mother of Queen Elizabeth II is 101. Delegates from the World Conference on Racism headed home today with a lot of second-guessing about whether more could have been accomplished at their meeting in South Africa. The United States, you'll remember, walked out because it objected to what it believed would be an unfair attack on Israel and Zionism. Secretary of State Powell didn't even attend. ABC's Jackie Judd reports tonight on what many people believe was a lost opportunity for the U.S.
The conference delegates worked overtime and finally cobbled together a closing document. A document that describes slavery as a crime against humanity and colonialism as unjust, and acknowledges the role of Western nations in both.
The determination of the delegates to succeed for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the millions who are facing racism every day, is what made this conference a success.
Many delegates and many critics of the Bush administration felt it would have been more of a success if the U.S. delegation had remained in Durban.
The fact that we left, I think, had the unfortunate impact of leaving the impression that the issues of racism and slavery and the history thereof were somehow of lesser importance to the United States.
A former UN ambassador and civil rights leader says the U.S., more than any other country, had the moral authority to teach the delegates a few lessons about overcoming racism.
Nobody has struggled with the human condition any more or any better than the United States of America.
The administration maintains it made the right decision when it walked out because the real issues of racism were overwhelmed by the debate over Zionism.
The sad thing is that this conference was hijacked and that it didn't deal with the agenda that it should have.
In the end, the document did not equate racism and Zionism. In fact, it expressed alarm about an increase in anti-Semitism. So the U.S. got some of what it wanted, but in the process wound up disappointing, even offending many other nations. Jackie Judd, ABC News, Washington.
When we come back this evening, a new report alleges widespread sexual exploitation of American children. We'll take a closer look. Basketball stars, bankers, and billionaires who get government farm aid will be on the money trail tonight. And the very successful models who are not, shall we say, the fairest of them all.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
There is one item in the medical file tonight of interest to many people. 12 of the country's leading medical journals have issued a warning about the influence that drug companies have on clinical research. They sponsor many medical studies, which are often then used to promote a company's product. The journals have now pledged to publish only studies over which researchers have complete control, and it will be very difficult. Next on the broadcast this evening, paying basketball stars to grow trees and bankers to grow oats. We're on the money trail. On Capitol Hill this week, the Congress takes up the question of government subsidies to farmers. These subsidies boost the income of people who farm crops such as corn, wheat, rice, cotton, soybean. And 2/3 of the $27 billion in subsidies granted last year went to just 10% of American farm owners. ABC's John Martin is on the money trail and finds some very familiar names.
There's a long list of people who received subsidies over the last 5 years. Scottie Pippen, who earns $15 million a year from the Portland Trail Blazers, received $131,000 for growing hardwood trees in his native Arkansas. Media mogul Ted Turner, who has given billions to the United Nations and other causes, received $217,000 to grow corn, oats, sorghum, and wheat on his property.
Beautiful potato.
J.R. Simplot, whose company earned billions supplying potatoes to a fast food chain, received $750,000 in subsidies for his crops. Banker David Rockefeller received $359,000 for growing his crops. And money even goes to subsidize farms owned by members of Congress. In Arkansas, Representative Marion Barry's family received $405,000 over 5 years for corn, oats, rice, sorghum, and wheat. Why is a member of Congress who votes on subsidies getting subsidies?
I don't vote to give myself a subsidy. What I do is do the best I can to be sure that the American people have a safe, reliable food supply.
Without help, farmers argue, they will fail because of low prices paid at the supermarket by the American consumer.
Welfare subsidy? That's not what farmers want to hear. They don't like the current system, but they don't like being told they're getting money they don't need.
Critics argue that taxpayer money should not go to subsidize well-off farmers who can produce more than enough food for the country on their own. A research group that obtained the federal subsidy figures predicts that the $168 billion farm bill before Congress will waste money.
We're going to be locked in for 10 years to a payment system that just rewards the very biggest recipients without ever asking the simple question, do you need the money?
Right now, subsidies go to almost anyone who farms. Reformers say it is time for a change. John Martin, ABC News, Gillette, Arkansas.
That's our report on World News Tonight. This week on the broadcast, the controversial Christian missionaries who risked their lives to win converts, and the home run race you haven't heard about. I'm Peter Jennings. We hope you have a good evening and a good week. Good night.